And those will be available on our website and at DEO's website as well. Robert, if you could go to the next slide. So these are our sort of standard Zoom meeting procedures. We do ask that everybody stay muted unless you're speaking. If you're calling in, you can press *6 to mute and unmute. I think at this point, everybody knows how to raise their hands on a Zoom meeting. And really, I think that's it. I want to introduce Katie Smith from the Department of Economic Opportunity, who's going to sort of lead the discussion in the polling section. And we thank you again for taking the time to give your input.
Thank you so much, Jag. I appreciate that. And welcome. And thank you for participating in the Florida Office of Broadband workshop today. These workshops are being hosted by the Department of Economic Opportunity in partnership with the Florida Regional Planning Councils. My name is Katie Smith, and I'm the director for the Office of Community Partnerships and the Florida Office of Broadband at the Department of Economic Opportunity. I'll be your host today, along with my colleague, Sean Lewis, the Community Program Manager with the Office of Community Partnerships at DEO. I want to thank our friends and partners at the Northeast Florida Regional Planning Council for facilitating our workshop today, and DEO with the invitations, the technical assistance, and for facilitating and contacting and collecting information, and all of the comments that are going to be included that we gather today. They will be included into our Florida strategic plan for broadband. They're important for expanding broadband internet access in your region. So again, I'm Katie Smith, and I have been with DEO for the last 6 years. I have worked in business development with large companies expanding and relocating in Florida, and I've done economic development assisting small and rural communities. I began working to establish the Florida Office of Broadband less than a year ago. Today, we're going to begin the discussion on broadband, focusing on accessibility, what the current status of broadband internet is in your region for your industry sector, and how you define broadband expansion. You are identified as a leader in your industry sector, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion and your comments. Next slide. During the 2020 legislative session, House Bill 969 established the Office of Broadband DEO to increase availability and effectiveness of broadband internet throughout the state, especially in small and rural communities. The bill also authorized DEO to access federal grant dollars to assist communities with expansion of broadband services. And the office is currently staffed by existing resources in the Office of Community Partnerships at DEO. The Office of Broadband has been very fortunate to have the support and commitment of fantastic partners, such as the Florida Regional Councils Association, the Florida Association of Counties, the Small Counties Coalition, Florida Internet and Television, state agencies such as the Florida Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, Department of Education, and so many others. Next slide, please. So per section 364.0135 Florida statutes, the office has been provided 4 main directives. You can see those directives here on your screen. They are to create a strategic plan to increase the use of broadband internet service in Florida, build and facilitate technology planning teams, which is exactly what we're doing here today in these workshops. We are encouraging the use of internet service through broadband grant programs, and we're also directed to monitor, participate in, and provide input to FCC proceedings. Next slide, please. So to meet the directives of the statute, the DEO adopted a phase approach to this. So the first phase of this is a feasibility study to specify the nature of the connectivity gap and why it exists. In 2020, DEO submitted an application to the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration with a request for $3 million to help fund the study. We were notified in the fall of 2020 that we were not awarded funding. However, with the help of our partners, the office has requested broadband studies, plans, and projects that are being completed on a regional, county, or community level to assist identifying the current status of broadband for the strategic plan. The second phase of this approach is what you see here. Number one, the creation of the strategic plan. The office has begun outlining the plan and is looking forward to aggregating the information collected during these workshops Can you hear me now? Okay. So the information that is gathered here today will be used as part of the DEO Florida Office of Broadband Strategic Plan. We're also collecting information from our website to include in the plan as well. The technology planning teams gathered together in the workshops over last week, this week, and also next week are from 13 different industry sectors, and you all will provide vital information to the conversation and the partnerships for expanding broadband accessibility. The third phase of our approach is the actual implementation of the initiatives that we identify in our strategic plan, and upon completion of the plan, we will be looking for other resources to identify as opportunities to assist us in that implementation. Okay, so next slide, please. The Office of Broadband has also created a website that houses information on federal and state funding opportunities for broadband. We regularly update this site. We include information on our workshops, the recordings of these workshops. We will soon include a link for a survey to include public input on broadband expansion. We also include funding opportunities that are federal and state opportunities for communities to utilize. One recent development you may have heard about is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or Rdof, from the FCC. $191 million was awarded to Florida entities, and the FCC has provided a summary of the auction by county and by the bidders within those counties. You can access the link on our website for more information, but it is important to note that DEO does not have a role in determining who gets what or how those funds can be utilized. Next slide, please. So to prepare for possible grant funding for the future through DEO and the Office of Broadband, we've identified priorities for projects and project proposals. And those proposals need to include barriers for removing those barriers to entry for underserved areas or unserved areas. They need to encourage local and regional investment, and it needs to address any of the needs that have been exposed during this COVID pandemic, such as remote working, distance learning, telemedicine, and I'm sure your industry can probably identify other areas aside from just those three that have been impacted. And finally, the Office of Broadband continuously monitors broadband development activity and participates in National Association discussions on a weekly basis with the NTIA and Broadband USA. Next slide, please. This slide, you can see our broadband map. So on the Office of Broadband website, we have this map that highlights internet speeds by census block. The state of Florida minimum internet download speeds map, yes, very long name, uses FCC data. And since January of 2015, the FCC has defined broadband internet as speeds greater than 25 as download speeds greater than 25 megabits per second and upload speeds of 3 megabits per second. We chose to represent this FCC data a little bit differently than they typically would, because one of our office goals is to focus on the underserved and unserved. We chose to highlight the census blocks with minimum internet download speeds, meaning anything 25.3 or less. The data for the map is provided by the Federal Communications Commission from June of 2019. It is for fixed internet service only. Satellite and mobile data is not included, but please feel free to log on to our website at floridajobs.org/broadband to check out the map for your community. It really is interesting. I think you'll find it pretty insightful. I know that there are some additional updates that will be made to the FCC website very soon, which means that we will get that data updated on our website as well. Next slide, please. So today is the 6th broadband workshop out of 10, and we are doing this conducted in partnership with the Florida Regional Councils Association. The 10 regional workshops are hosted by DEO and facilitated by the regional planning councils, and all of our workshops will be completed by next Friday, February 12th. The workshop participants include a variety of industry sector leaders, which you can see are listed here on this slide. They include everything from education, healthcare, local government, and more. And after the workshops are completed, the regional planning councils send us that information. We will include it into our strategic plan for broadband, and we will present this information to the legislature prior to session. If you will go to the next slide, please. And I think at this point, I'm going to kick it back to the RPC to get into some of the Poll Everywhere details.
Thanks, Katie. So we are using a system called Poll Everywhere to collect this statistical data from y'all. And you can see there's 2 ways to participate. Either you can go to the website and you can have it up next to the Zoom window, or you can text Gold Leaf 599 to the number 22333. And I'll repeat that in a moment for those of y'all who are on the phone. And if you text that, then it sends you prompts on how to participate in the poll. And it all ends up in the same data file. And we'll actually be able to see, I think, some of the results during the presentation. The way it works, just like any sort of multiple choice test, there's a letter next to each option to pick. If you're on the website, you just click on the one. If you're on the text, it'll send you the prompts and you text the letter back. So if you're on a cell phone or you want to participate by text, if you can do a text message to the number 22333, and that message should say Gold Leaf 599. And within a couple of seconds, you should get a response back, a text message introducing you to the Poll Everywhere system. And Robert, if you want to go to the next slide, I think that we have, yeah, so this is the real-time, results that y'all are sending in. I just want to check real quick and make sure that most of our folks can participate. If you're having trouble and you can't participate, please either raise your hand or just speak out. And we did mute everyone. Remember that if you're on a cell phone or a phone, you can unmute yourself by hitting *6.
Okay, so it looks like everybody is preferring chocolate, which has been the overwhelming winner every workshop so far. So I like to see that because I'm a chocolate fan myself. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with these. We have 8 questions for our broadband workshop today. And these 8 questions will help direct the Florida Office of Broadband in understanding the regional availability and accessibility of broadband internet service. The questions will also assist in the design of state programs and that strategic plan that we continue to talk about. So the very first question here is, which sector are you from? We really like to know what industry sector is represented today. It does help us get a better idea of how the conversation is going to flow and what kind of representation you have for your community. So of the 8 questions, we've got 3 that are pretty much housekeeping questions, this one and 2 others. I love seeing all of the local government. Thanks for showing up today and participating. We got some education, economic development organizations, service providers. Thanks, guys. Glad you're here today. All right. And let's go ahead to the next question, which is, where is your local business or industry sector located? Which county? This is fantastic. We have great representation today. Lots of people from Duval, lots from Flagler. This is great. I'm so glad that we have lots of representation from different communities today. And then the final housekeeping question that we have today is our next slide, which is, are you aware of any existing local broadband studies or plans for your area? We always get mixed reviews on this. Some know, some don't. We know that there are some communities that have had studies done, but maybe they're 10 years old, maybe they're 5 years old. And if you do have those, we would really love to take a look at them regardless of when they were completed. I think the Department of Economic Opportunity would find some value in knowing where, what direction your community was looking to go in. So it looks like it is overwhelming that for this group today that they're not aware of any studies. Okay, that's great. That is just great. So let's get on to our questions here. Of the following factors, which is the most important regarding broadband internet accessibility? And what we're looking for here is, how would you define that for your industry sector? Every community is a little bit different. Some we have seen are really more heavily associated with cost. Recently, I think it was earlier this week, it was definitely reliability. I think it really is interesting to look at each community and each region and how that varies. It looks today like we have a lot of cost. All right, it looks like we have a lot of cost and reliability that is the main factors. Is there anyone with us today that would like to speak to this? I know I've heard from a good a good bit of you in the past, and I would love to hear from you today if you have any thoughts or comments to share with the group.
And just a reminder, we did mute everyone at the beginning of the meeting. And so if you want to speak, just you will need to unmute yourself and then try to remember to mute yourself again afterwards.
Okay, Kate, this is Larry Harvey. And
Hi, Larry.
You know my position as with FAC and the Rural Caucus Committee. I think the reason reliability, in my opinion, is so prevalent is because when you look at, just take rural Putnam County, for example, you have so many providers that say they're delivering broadband services, but it's not reliable and it's not affordable, and it just isn't there for us. And I think that's why reliability is so important, that you can either go to cable or go to satellite or whatever, but reliability in rural Florida, I think, is going to trump the cost of that, or even speed, because we know if we get reliability, we can get speed, and we get more reliability, that should drive down cost. So I think you're going to see reliability in rural Florida as the #1 issue, because it's just not reliable for businesses or people to do their job, for students to go to school, for telemedicine, for businesses to operate their mom and pop stores. It's just not there. So, and there's a piecemeal, everybody, doing something with it, but it's not a consistent reliability, if that makes sense.
It definitely does, and thank you for that comment. I think you're definitely onto something, and I think that we're starting to hear a lot of the similar comments with various communities, and specifically those rural communities. I'm curious if in the more urban areas, while our office, the Office of Community Partnerships, typically focuses a little bit more on the small and rural, I know that the urban areas, there's still pockets that have those same issues. So I'm curious if there's anyone that could speak to the urban section, maybe?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Catherine Biancanello. I'm representing Flagler County. So I just kind of wanted to mirror, I'm not the urban area, but I wanted to mirror what the last speaker had said, that really reliability is huge. We have people in our rural community that are paying a ton of money for satellite, and it's just not there for them. It's not meeting their needs. So I definitely see how reliability definitely trumps, all else as far as cost and things like that. So just having one single service option that truly is broadband would make a huge impact.
Thank you, Catherine. That's really good information. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Terry Webb, Duval County Public Schools.
Hi.
Hi. And so we kind of walk in two worlds. We walk in a very rural western section of our district, and then we also have our urban section. So we kind of run the gamut of both issues: cost in our urban areas and reliability in our rural areas. And then we also still have the issue in some of our western and northwestern sections of our county that the reliability, again, is an issue as well for our students and learning.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. You're right. You probably do cover all of those areas where you are.
Miss Smith?
Yes.
Hi, this is Sharice Stewart. So we are the neighbor to Terry there in Clay County. And I would agree with what everybody said. We have close to 220,000 residents in Clay County, still have a lot of rural parts in Clay County, and have a lot of those same issues. I think our more urban folks still have issues as well, but definitely in those areas that are semi-rural or still rural, I mean, it's a huge issue where a lot of times there's no way to get internet to those areas. Even where I live, I mean, I can't get the satellite internet. So here I have myself as an example, high school and a freshman in college, high school junior, freshman in college, and it is a true challenge to have any kind of work or connection with school from home. So
Okay.
I think everybody's still affected, and I think it's small counties all the way to large counties in Duval, and then us as a mid-sized county as well. So.
Thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. That's great.
Hey, Katie, it's Brad.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, how are you? I think for the speaker, either one or two speakers ago, where they were talking about they're a hybrid of urban and rural. I think, I know we've talked about it on the other calls, at least as far as cost is concerned. A lot of people know about it, but it always bears repeating, is that for those households that qualify for free and reduced lunch, our members, which are the Comcast, Spectrum, Cox Communications companies, they offer a low-cost broadband opportunity where it's $15 a month. And so if you're not aware of those programs, and you do have that urban/suburban market where they may have access, but cost is an issue, that program's been obviously a program du jour during COVID. And then further, where those households can't swing the $15, we know down in South Florida, our members have been working with the school districts directly to identify on a granular level the individual households to see if the cable company is subsidizing all of it down to 15. The school districts have been stepping in to pick up the other 15. So a lot of good options out there for those that have access. But I always find on these calls and others that people are still surprised that this program's there. It's been going for 10 years, but it's one for folks not to forget about. Thanks.
Hey, Kate, this is Larry Harvey again.
And in that solution, Brad, we have a hybrid solution as well. We do participate in the Sprint 1 million, and then we also have the $15 a month solution. But some of our students, we still, with the connectivity with the hotspots and things like that, the reliability in our more rural areas is still not there. It's very difficult for them, even with the hotspots that we help provide them and facilitate for them. So
yeah, I think
reliability
Katie, probably
is
your
still
next
an
slide
issue.
will. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Katie. I think your next slide will get to that other conversation, but we in our industry are we understand that it's going to be the multiples of technologies to reach that last 4.5% of Florida. Florida's got 95% of its citizens have access to high-speed broadband. But that last, 4.5–5% is what we're talking about here, and it's going to take all the technologies to reach those folks for them to have the choice to subscribe.
Katie, this is Kevin Craig with AT&T, and I want to just kind of echo on Brad's comments. We have a program called Access, and speaking to Brad's point, those 95% of places where there is availability, our program Access by AT&T, it's $10 a month or less. With up to 25 megs. And as Brad was getting to, a lot of that is just raising awareness and making sure, the school systems and everyone's up to speed on that. So just wanted to weigh in. And again, that's Access with AT&T, but obviously for the places where those speeds are available.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Larry Harvey, I think, had a comment if you wanted to unmute.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I appreciate you calling on me. What I was just hearing was a lot more people are being added to basically the broadband that you have. So nowadays with streaming of TV, if you will, everything's being done using broadband. And I can tell you, I know when school's out in my town of Interlaken, a two-light town, come 4:30, 4:45, you don't get to stream anymore for a while, and you don't get to communicate like you did. And your computer is now circling, looking for more broadband. What people don't realize is that some of the local providers, they could turn up the switch, but it's the same cable that's been in the ground since I've lived there for 36 years. So nothing, that hasn't really changed. Or some of the cables that are up on the telephone poles have been cut and stretched and spliced back together to the point where they're really not high speed anymore. I mean, they give you a false sense of that. So I think when you hear about, yeah, we're going to add more people and we have this and we have that, still one cable and it's still one World Wide Web, if you will, and we're just dumping more people on it. So we got to find that solution of how do we provide reliable, affordable, and then you got some providers who actually hold you hostage if you don't take their phone, if you don't take their streaming, if you don't take the internet, you can't get it. And that's not fair to these people either. So that's what's happening in rural Florida. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I hear what, but I do think that, you know, that's good as part of this conversation to definitely hear. And why don't we go to the next slide here? Because I would like to kind of move that into what kind of technology. Seems like we're starting to go into that technology conversation. So what type of internet technology does your industry currently use? And we're going to talk about the current use that you have now. And the next question is going to be future use. So it looks so far like everyone, I've got 100% fiber, but I'm hearing a lot of people may be using satellite out there. So I'd be interested to see what that percentage is. And, you know, Larry, what you were just talking about is good information and is a good part of that conversation, and how DEO can help going forward, and how, you know, how we can try to structure our programs and try to assist where we can. So is there anyone who could maybe elaborate a little bit more on the different types of technology that are currently being used for your industry sector? I know I'm hearing that hotspots, I see in the comments here that the hotspots are awful, but that the hotspots are open during the pandemic, and that the satellite is only offering in Western Flagler County. So those are really good comments. Is there anyone else who might be able to speak to that?
This is Catherine Biancanello again, Flagler County. So for us, what we have is a mix. So we are in Flagler County where we have Palm Coast, and it's very suburban, and then some urban areas as well. But then Western Flagler County is where we do not have any other option other than satellite. So you have those people that are professionals that are having to pay, you know, an X amount of money for satellite. And then in addition to that, when we had to go to remote learning, the school started to offer those hotspots. But unfortunately, if you don't have the service out there to get the technology working, like they were handing out, you know, certain companies, I think Sprint at one time and T-Mobile, if you don't have the service out there, essentially those hotspots are useless. So it was a big challenge last year to kind of regroup and figure out what would work best. The problem with the use of hotspots is they have a data cap. So once you've attended half the month's meetings, you can no longer attend at the speeds that you need for a meeting. So this year they did start to offer a grant program where the county, if you're full-time remote, they can give you 100% where you're not capped with your hotspots, but that's only for those students that are 100% remote. So it still kind of leaves those people in the dust that need to do homework and things when they're, you know, home.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. That's good insight. And that definitely helps us as well moving forward. Anyone else?
This is Bill Ferry. I would like to really revisit a little bit about the upgrading that's done. Certainly for Comcast, but I'm quite sure all providers are regularly upgrading and adding even more fiber to their networks. Even today, Comcast has announced a speed increase for its internet services. For example, Internet Essentials, the low-cost service product for us at the $9.95 rate, that's going from 25 down to to 50 down to 5 up. So it's actually a very significant increase. And again, I'm really speaking for almost all the providers. I think each one has a story to tell about how the system here in the greater Jacksonville area, where we are located, is a state-of-the-art system. And it is something that's managed and ensuring that everyone does get reliability.
Thank you, Bill. That's a great point. And you know, I from what I'm hearing, I hear both sides of it, and DEO does have the advantage of hearing both sides of, you know, the amount of work that the providers are doing to make sure that access is available, but also hearing the communities themselves saying, you know, maybe it's a little bit different. So Sharice Stewart said in our chat box, said that hotspots on cellular lines are used heavily in her county, and however, most of the data is used up in a few days, and most students and folks are trying to work from home. And I can see how that would absolutely be a whole nother challenge. So what I want to do is I want to go to the next slide, and what type of technology would help you in the future. So we know what may be working for your community, and we've talked about what is or what is not working, and what's currently being done by our providers. But in your opinion, for your sector, what would help eliminate some of those barriers that you're discussing here in the chat? Would anybody like to speak to that?
Kate, I would. This is Larry.
Okay, please.
You know, the only thing I know is either DSL or fiber. I don't know any of the other. I don't know how good satellite, you know, we keep sending all these satellites up in space every day, it appears to be, from Florida. I'm really excited to see what that might look like. But unfortunately, I can only answer the question of what I'd like to see today. And that might not be a month from now or a year from now. The right fiber might not be the answer. It might be all this other stuff that we don't even know or hasn't turned on yet.
Well, to your point, Larry, what we've heard a lot about is, from our previous sessions, is multi-technology expansion and utilizing those satellites, utilizing fiber, utilizing lots of other different technologies to make that more accessible. And I think,
hey, Katie, if I can jump in here.
Yeah, sure.
You know, one of the things, especially for the rural markets, FIT as well as the other providers have been working and having conversations on the MCOR's conversation about connecting all these rural marketplaces via smart corridors. And there's been one example, and it's an example that's repeated technologically across the state of Florida and across the nation. But Hardee County did a pilot where they partnered with a point-to-point wireless system, and point-to-point fixed wireless is kind of a hybrid of a wireless scenario where it's two parabolic discs and they kind of point at each other. And that's a technology that is available today. It's not one we got to wait for satellites in the future. And kind of to the previous speaker's point of, you know, we only know what's available today and what works. Well, that's a technology that's working for the rural markets. Now, that's not a technology that my members deploy, but, you know, again, you know, as we've said on other calls, and we'll say it on this one, it's going to take everybody's technology working in combination with one another to reach the rural marketplaces. But you know, for anyone that wants to talk to Bill Lambert down in Hardee County, he's got he's had some good successes with some of those technologies that reach those marketplaces. I will add that our members, while increasing speeds and increasing investments in existing networks, just announced some multi-billion-dollar commitments to dovetail on the Rdof dollars nationally, and you know, a 3-to-1, I think a 2 or 3-to-1 metric on partnering with those federal dollars to invest in reaching out to the rural folks. So I, you know, while the answer of it's coming isn't necessarily comforting to folks that need it today, there are technologies that you don't have to wait for that are available today.
That's a great point. And I think even our Office of Broadband might reach out to Bill Lampert and talk about that a little bit more. Because that's—
I'll be happy to talk to you.
Anyone else have some thoughts on this? Okay. All right. Well, let's go to our next question. What is the greatest challenge or barrier concerning broadband internet faced by your community or region? And is that population density? Is it cost? Is it just a lack of providers? And this really is such a, it really varies, and it changes with every region, and I think even in every county.
And Katie, here in some of our previous conversations, folks have spoken up and said that they wanted accessibility as a choice here. What we're actually asking is, in terms of accessibility, using these choices to kind of clarify that question.
And one other thought is, if you can also put, when you're chatting, it would be really helpful to know your industry sector. If you would put your name in your industry sector, that would be great for helping us, the DEO, identify you and make sure that we can reach out to you and contact you going forward. So does anybody want to possibly comment on their barrier or what that challenge looks like for your community?
This is Dana Jones with Putnam County, along with Larry. When I saw this question, it's very difficult for me because while we have great service with partners like AT&T and Comcast, they just don't go out into all the areas of our large rural county. So people in the western end, where Larry is, my sister and others, they have another provider, but the service is almost unusable. It's so slow or so unreliable. So we have places that don't have cell towers. So even if 5G came, it wouldn't be an option. So there's just so many barriers in the county that those could be. We also have a high poverty rate. You know, you can't check more than one, but that's what I wanted to do because we have all of that as huge barriers. And our students still today are reliant for the most part on the business community opening up their own Wi-Fi for them to drive up and sit in parking lots. We did not have enough hotspots here. When we looked at the maps like Comcast, you could see them, you know, all over Duval County, but in Putnam, there were 3 close in to the interior of the county, none on the outside. So we had to rely on our larger businesses that had that connectivity and drive people to it. So while I only chose one, I just wanted that input that we could have chose all 4.
Okay, that's really good information.
This is Jared Shoup. I'm the CIO from Flagler County. So just to give you a little bit of feedback, because the question on this one's a little bit vague, because for those that don't sort of understand the process and the return on investments for the ISPs or for the providers, you know, a lot of them may put down C, or the lack of internet service providers, or limited options. And a lot of those limits come from the population density. So there's a little bit of misconception, I believe, with a few people on this, because I know I'm getting some other text messages on the side, asking me like, okay, what is it that we have? And if you look at it from just the surface would say you have lack of internet service and providers, but the actual real root cause is you may only have one house every mile, or you may not have a house for miles before the next house. And for somebody to run either coax or broadband, or any type of broadband, whether it be fiber or coax, the ROI is not there for the vendor if they're going to get a $95 charge when they've got to lay $70,000 in facilities to get there.
Understood. And that's a really good point. And thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's definitely something that we will have to really look at for our office and going forward, and how we can assist and how we can partner. Anybody else? Okay. Well, Sean, is there anything else that I haven't touched on today or that we need to bring up?
I just want to make sure that the folks from the different sectors, education, healthcare, we actually haven't heard a whole lot from the healthcare folks in the last couple of meetings. I want to make sure that if there are any specific challenges that you guys are facing within your sector, that you raise those, because as we're putting together our plans, we want to make sure that we're capturing things that might be odd or unique that maybe someone else hasn't mentioned. So please, if you've got stuff out there like that, please share it with us. Speak up.
And I'm going to interject here. It looks like we have one comment in the chat box. Has Florida looked into implementing a dig once policy to encourage conduit to be put into the ground for providers to utilize? That is something I really can't speak to, only because it's just, I'm still too new to be able to really answer that. And maybe Brad could answer.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah. The answer is, of course, that conversation is always in play, and there are municipalities that will notify when they're opening up the ground. The trick is, at least with our members, is bank conduit is the answer, because whether you're a telecom company, and I'll defer to my telecom friends, but I believe I'm right. Anyone who's supplying 911 services has to ensure the continuity of their network. So when it comes to conduit, it's typically a banked conduit kind of solution is ideal, because as you lay fiber or coax next to each other, if not cable to cable or at the next node, interference is always a challenge, and for surety of the network, that's kind of an issue. But that conversation came up a lot during the MCORS conversation, and the greater coordination of those opportunities is always welcome. So while dig once is a good engineering concept, in practice it means it makes a world of difference. But the challenge is you can be digging in the ground, but if you're talking about Wi-Fi hotspots, all of those need to be aerial. So it's a combination, but maximum coordination between both existing providers, potential providers, and municipalities when the roads are going to be opened are great. It's a great opportunity to coordinate. And then I think my boss, Bill Ferry, just made another comment in the comments as well.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So providers tend to prefer to lay their own lines and conduits, and there can be some savings with one dig, but not that much. And that's good insight. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
This is Jared Chu.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, you brought up the healthcare. This is Jared Chu from Flagler County again. You brought up the point about healthcare, and I can tell you, my previous hat about 5 years ago, I did electronic medical records for healthcare practices. So internet was a big thing. Most healthcare practices, and the reason why you're probably getting are lacking on that is because most healthcare industry moves towards where they have the proper services, and internet is one of the services that they typically have. So most of their unless they're doing outreach, most of their main offices where they have their needs has proper internet. So that market share is going to be very difficult to find through the industry's perspective, probably no matter where you go, just because they do place themselves where they already have facilities. And I think worth speaking about is, Tesla, Starlink putting up, they just put up, I believe, 120 satellites in the last, 2 days here out of Cape Canaveral in Florida. It's a huge potential for internet whenever that does go live. He hasn't done beta tests this far south. We've signed up, I think I've signed up for about 50 different beta tests at each one of our sites. I'm actually standing near one of our tower sites on the west side, which gets very limited internet to be able to do this meeting. But I think we need to start looking towards, partners much similar. And I know the ISPs are on board, but low orbit satellites is the way that a lot of this is going to be going. And in the near future, we're going to have some opportunities that may open up. And I know that a lot of other markets, a lot of other states have already worked with them to try and get, whether it be different territories, Indian territories, et cetera, to get that internet service as beta tests. And I don't know if the state of Florida has actually made that connection with Tesla and their organization to be able to see if we can even get that as a potential right here in Florida, since, most of those satellites are launched right here in Florida. So there's an opportunity that's there as well.
So I can speak from the DEO perspective. We have spoken with Starlink and we are having these conversations. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. That's actually the first time that someone has actually brought that up during our conversation. So thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to make one comment. Eric Anderson with the Regional Council, but we work with the healthcare sector regularly. I think the comments regarding fixed facilities in healthcare sector is absolutely spot on. They go to where the service is provided. But a large growing sector of our healthcare sector is now home health, and those people that are having to navigate rural areas as well as urban areas, but their ability to connect via phone, do the medical records, and all of those things are really tied into that availability as they navigate, really across the region and in multiple counties to provide services to folks.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for talking to that point.
And one more thing to add to that too, this is Catherine Biancanello again, is, with COVID, healthcare has completely transformed. A lot of offices weren't even open. They were doing all telehealth. You couldn't even get an appointment in the office, of course, when we were at the height. So I just think a lot of things have changed, and it's really causing a lot of disparities when people aren't able to connect to their telehealth appointments and attend, because of lack of service. So that's another thing that definitely is a huge issue.
Bill Ferry with Comcast. Again, I'm not in healthcare, but I talk to a lot of people in healthcare. And one of the things I think I hear is a need for the bandwidth, because again, if you have a radiologist who is reading screens and that, they need a very good connection and a lot of bandwidth, maybe a higher, sometimes even a business class level of service. And then when you get into those tertiary sites, a point-to-point system of direct fiber, that's usually what they're looking for in those areas. And then lastly, and this is really kind of the industry is really solving this, is the number of items in the household that can run off of the Wi-Fi unit. Used to be that you could maybe get 6 or 8 different connections off of your modem. Well, now we're getting into the 50 range, right? Well, that's excellent for that home health care, whether it's a CPAP machine or a heart monitor that runs off of Wi-Fi in the house. So you're seeing the providers, and again, that's all the providers here that are probably on this call, is that they're experimenting with that and making that even more robust inside the house to handle that smart home type of environment.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments on this? This is great conversation. This is really, I will tell you, I'm learning a lot here. So I know DEO is picking up a lot of good information. Any other thoughts?
I've got one more, Katie.
Okay.
Since we're talking about telehealth, are your municipalities taking into account that there's possibly also an education piece? COVID laid bare the need for access in terms of rural telehealth. I think there's also a piece that maybe we don't talk enough about in terms of educating the end users on how that works and how they can access their healthcare providers. So is anyone in the region talking about that or making plans for that?
No thoughts?
Hi, my name is Janet. I'm from Elder Source in Duval County, and we serve 7 of the counties in our Northeast Florida area. And yes, we have the barrier that we have, I agree with Sean, is education and comfort level, I guess, in using the internet among elderly and disabled elderly. We've recently partnered up with a program called Get Set Up that the person has to have a television and they can use a remote, and it is someone comes to their house and installs it, but it's just simply installing something on their television, and they can use just a simple 12-button remote that they provide, and they can take classes on the internet through the TV. And if they don't have, they have to have internet, but they can have like a mobile hotspot or something like that. That's something, you know, relatively affordable. But some of the classes that they do are based on familiarizing yourself with how to use an iPad, how to do telehealth, things like that. And it's a really cool program. It's called Get Set Up. And the typical user may have to pay for certain classes, and some classes are free. And they have about 160 classes available right now on that program. And they are specifically for like age 50 and above. And all the people that are doing the teaching are 50 and above. And so you basically can go in and sign up for a class. And then, so there might be a certain class on a certain day, you know, Tuesday at 10 a.m. And so you sign up for that class. And so it's an interactive class. And it can be an educational class, or it can be on a certain topic, or it can be like a social hour with a topic. So some of those things that make it as simple as possible for the end user to want to and be comfortable with using the platform, I think
that's great.
Is beneficial.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really fantastic, because that's actually another whole nother component when you talk about accessibility and how to make internet more accessible. We assume that you know how to get to it and how to use it and how to log on, and that's not always the case. So that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like a great program.
Yes, I apologize. I didn't have my video on before, but yes, it is a really good program. Elder Source through that Northeast Florida area has some spots where we can actually, for an elder person, and pay for certain slots. So those classes that typically would cost maybe $5 to do is free for an individual. So if you have any questions about that, you can contact the Elder Source helpline at 888-242-4464. Or you can just call our main number and ask for myself, Janet Dickinson, and I'll get you to the right person. And our main number is 904-391-6600.
Would you mind putting that in the chat, all of that information for us?
Yes, I will. And there's like a Facebook website for it and everything too. So I'll put all that information in the chat box.
That's fantastic. I think we would definitely enjoy having that great information. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
So much for that. That's great.
Excellent. So is there anybody else? Any other comments?
Okay.
All right, the conversation has been fantastic today, and thank you so much for all of your thoughts and information. I have one last question in this poll, and would you like to opt into future communication from the Florida Office of Broadband? It's always a resounding yes, but you know, I want to see if everybody feels that way today. And but any last questions or comments before we part ways today?
Yes, I do have a comment I'd like to make. This is Commissioner Mullins from Flagler County. I know we're talking about a lot of different options out there and different things. And I went through this years ago in Georgia where the providers, they made a lot of excuses. They took a lot of money up front. They made a lot of excuses why they couldn't get the internet to certain areas. And when we looked into it and reviewed it, it was one simple reason. They took the money, they wanted to keep it in other areas of the company, and they did not want to invest in redoing the infrastructure that they had already invested in years prior. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about a lot of solutions here and a lot of different ideas, but some of these things are far off, and they're off a little bit more, maybe a year, 2 years. And we've got people that have medical, educational, and needs that are needing it now. I mean, they need it now. So we really need to, I think the focus needs to be on, of course, we look at this stuff as always evolving and what future brings, but we also need to really take a look and say, hey, how can we get this to them now and get this to the rural areas that we're having the trouble with?
I appreciate that comment. On a personal level, I wish I could do more and get those resources to them as soon as possible. And I think it is going to take a village to get us those resources to everyone as quickly as they can, because we needed them 3 months ago. We needed them 9 months ago. It is a process, and together we can make it happen. But thank you for that. I appreciate you commenting today.
I agree totally.
Anyone else today?
Hi there. My name is Anna McDaniel Wyatt, and I work for a nonprofit organization. So I think something that I've heard a couple of people perhaps hint at who are working at different community organizations is that there's a statistic that was referenced a few times that 94 to 95% of Floridians have access to the technology and what the infrastructure needed to access broadband internet. But I think for many of us who are working in community organizations, the 4 or 6% or 5%, that's our 100%. Those are 100% of the people we're serving. And so, I heard earlier someone from Duval County Public Schools mention that there is significant need amongst their students. And I would agree, having been a teacher in Duval County Public Schools. And so I think that there might need to be some more targeted conversations with those of us who are working with the 4 and 5% as our 100%, because we may have a different view of the multiple and overlapping issues that are present to getting access to what seems to be a small percentage of the full population, but are representative of a much larger portion of our service populations.
Excellent, thank you. And
hey, Katie, this is Brad. If I could add to that, I really want to thank the last speaker for her comments. I think one of the challenges our industry faces is while we offer these low-cost internet programs, and school districts are stepping up to even cover the remaining delta, it's really about awareness. So I know our member companies are always looking for opportunities to work with folks that are on the front lines and seeing that. So I know Bill Ferry's on from Comcast, but if you're not already working with the regional folks from our members, Comcast Charter, or our friends in the telecom space, to look at that 100%, adoption is clearly a big challenge for those that do have access to it. and simply they're focused on getting their kids fed, which is why they fill out the first form, but they don't look at the other services that are available because of that qualification. So if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to reach out to our members and our friends in the telecom space. But thank you very much for those comments.
This is Bill Eldridge from the city of Palm Coast. I guess I'm a little curious with regards to the 95% number that we're all using here, and I think that number might be let's say slightly inaccurate based on the 25.3 classification for broadband. If any person within a region is classified or has the capability of being 25.3, that whole region is considered to be broadband accessible, which leads to these higher numbers, which in turn then prevents a concentration on these areas that actually need the broadband. And as Jared Shoup pointed out earlier, this isn't something that's going to be driven by business. There is a cost that's involved, and the return on that cost isn't always palatable to the businesses. But again, if we don't classify our needs correctly, then we're not going to be able to take a look and see, hey, there is a problem here, and we need to address it. I mean, just on this conversation alone, it sounds to me like there was a lot more than 5% of the people that were complaining that they don't have internet access. So again, the other thing with that classification too is that also prevents federal grants from being applied to those areas because it is deemed that it is broadband accessible. So one of the biggest problems that we need to address is the correct classification of what truly is broadband and how much of certainly of our area is broadband accessible.
Katie, this is Brad. Just if I could.
Yes, please.
So to the previous speaker's comment, well echoed and well supported by our industry. The FCC of the past 2 years spent about a year and a few months redeveloping a methodology to much more granularly identify where broadband is and where broadband isn't. And so the old methodology, which was census block, would be if one person was served, then everybody was considered served in that block. Not inaccurate at all representation of where broadband was. The new methodology is using, they call them polygons, but they're much more dialed in. And then the FCC developed the methodology to be able to map much more in detail of where it is and where it isn't, so that folks can identify where the gaps are. And then the second piece was they just got their funding approved 10 days ago by the president and obviously Congress to begin that mapping process using that granular mapping. So from that perspective, detailed maps are coming, and I believe speeds of 25.3 and higher, which is considered served, is the FCC threshold, because there are places that have 10.1 and DSL, which is considered underserved or unserved by all intents and purposes, at least for federal money. But no, to the previous speaker's point, he's right in the sense that we really need to identify where those gaps are, and obviously we're applauding DEO for the plan that you guys are executing to see where it is and be able to capture those dollars, those federal dollars.
Thanks, Brad.
Bill, to that point, that's actually a really large part of why DEO on our webpage, our maps are geared towards making that point. Mm-hmm. With the new federal data methodology, it will help us make our mapping even more accurate, because we want to show the minimums, not the maximums, because it tells a more accurate story. Mm-hmm. You make a great point, and Brad, thank you for that.
Hey, this is Chris Walker from T-Mobile. So just wanted to chime in. All the talk about access, and there's no great place to throw this in, so I'm kind of ham-fisted saying there. you know, one thing that, you know, we like many others have been, you know, been partners on addressing the digital divide, and just personally before working for T-Mobile, I worked, you know, for the American Heart Association on grocery access, and one of the common things, you know, of access to anything, particularly, you know, to the population we're talking about, it took me a while to really realize, you know, when we're talking about access, to help to break it down into a three-legged stool. You know, there's access of affordability, there's access of availability, and then there's access of, you know, awareness, know-how in that bucket. And sometimes, and by breaking it down that way, because I think what happens is, you know, it requires different players to address each one. And so when we're all talking about access, sometimes we need to be specific about, and not even specific, but also intentionally realizing, okay, in this area, the issue's availability, or this area, it's or it's two, or, you know, or all three. But by doing that, that helps define what we're talking about. And I think more quickly leading to, you know, a lot of the solutions, frankly, aren't that hard. It's just getting to them quick. So just all this access talk, felt like I should chime in with that. And
well, I think you're right on, because that's one of the things that we talk about when we talk about accessibility. Is, I know for our office, I look at accessibility as three different parts. Is it can you get to the internet? Or is it accessibility once I get there that I have the right speed? Or is it accessibility, I have the other two, but I need the device to get to it?
Right.
You know, where in that spectrum are you? And that's, so accessibility really is such a different approach. And we're going to have to take quite a different approach for a few of these different topics. Affordability, I can't necessarily speak to, but I'm so glad that our providers can at this point in time. However, the accessibility, and that's really where I think you're spot on. And it's definitely something that we have to focus on to start with, to know what does that mean? Define accessibility. So thank you for that point. Is there anyone else? I love the conversation. It's great. Okay, does our RPC friends have any other thoughts or comments for us for the conversation?
At this point, we'd love to just thank everybody for taking the time to give your input. This is obviously a big issue, and it touches education, it touches medicine, and economic development, and those are all areas that we try to help find regional solutions within. And so we'll continue to be involved in this issue and working with the DEO. And let us know what questions and comments you have. You can reach me directly at jshad@nefrc.org. Thanks again.
Well, thank you to our DEO leadership for their support and guidance in the establishment of this office. Thank you to Florida Regional Councils Association for your partnership and volunteering your services. Thank you to the Regional Planning Councils for your support and technology support for this and facilitating these workshops, and especially the one today. Thank you to the Florida Association of Counties, the Small Counties Coalition, Brad at Florida Internet and Television. Thank you so much. Your comments are always so helpful. And last but not least, the internet providers for joining us on every single conversation and being able to add some valuable input. So all of you that participated today, thank you so much. We really appreciate your comments, and please do not hesitate to reach out to the DEO. We would love to chat with you anytime and learn more about your region. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.